Hello, and welcome to the next installment in the Law & Order video series. In this one, we'll be looking at BlueTwelve Studios' cyberpunkish feline adventure game, Stray. This was a game which featured a cat as the protagonist, and it certainly didn't disappoint. It had an interesting story and was actually an incredibly relaxing game, despite the stress that came from putting this adorable cat in dangerous situations. Despite collecting memories which give clues as to what happened in the city, a lot of the storytelling is done with the environment. Given that this is a fairly new game, this video will contain spoilers, so please be aware of that fact. But without further ado, let's dive in. Four cats sit in an alcove high up, sheltering from the torrential rain. After some playing, they sleep and wait for the rain to pass. A few hours later, the cats emerge and make their way down the pipes to ground level. It's clear from the amount of growth that this place has been abandoned for quite a long time. The four friends are having a great time when our feline protagonist falls after stepping on a weak piece of pipe and falls down. In a Lion King-esque, heart-wrenching sequence, the poor cat's three friends can only stand and watch as their mate falls down into the darkness. Injured and slightly limping at first, the cat walks through the dark, run-down area and seems to enter into the remnants of what appears to be a city. Small strange creatures seem to inhabit the city and scurry away. Along with that, the cat comes across what appears to be robots of some sort, one of which simply just dies. This abandoned city is not without its dangers though, and this leads to a tense chase where the strange small creatures from before try to jump onto the Stray. Stray gives them the slip though and winds up jumping through a window. The Stray seems to not be totally alone though, as strange messages are being displayed, leading Stray towards somewhere, whilst it is being watched by CCTV cameras. This somewhere that Stray was being led to turns out to be an old laboratory where they meet B12, a handy little robot that provides a flashlight and is able to communicate with Stray. B12, essentially an AI that was trapped inside the network, reveals that they were the one watching through the cameras and couldn't believe that they saw a cat in what they call the Dead City. B12 also reveals that they were helping a scientist who lived at the laboratory. Stray and B12 depart, but not before B12 gives them the harness, which contains a pouch for B12. Stray and B12 venture deep into the Dead City, into the slum area of the city, and they see a robot, like the one Stray came across before, but this one is alive. It's clear that they have never seen a cat before, as this robot freaks out and sets off an alarm, prompting their fellow robots to seek refuge and hide. Stray then meets the Guardian. These robots use their own language, and using B12 as a translator, the Guardian is confused that the cat isn't what they call a Zerk, confirms that they haven't seen their kind before, and tells them that they are welcome in the city as long as Stray doesn't try to eat anyone. And just like that, the city residents, known as companions, are at ease again. The Guardian says that the main elevator that will allow to take them up has no power, but directs Stray to a group called the Outsiders, a group that tried and failed to leave the city. The only outsider left in the slums is a companion named Momo. Upon meeting Momo, he seems to be trying to fix something. Momo explains that he's indeed the only outsider left in the slums. Momo seems to have lost his interest in going outside, saying that pursuing it will bring only loneliness and despair. Momo then says his friends are gone. These friends are Clementine, Balthazar and Doc. Momo is trying to fix something to attempt to contact his friends, but it won't work. Momo gives B12 his research data, his notebook in case they want it, and Momo says that he's done with the outside. After checking the notebook, B12 thinks they should find the other notebooks. Clementine, Balthazar and Doc still have their apartments in the slums, so after collecting all their respective notebooks, they take them back to Momo. One of them says that the transceiver that Momo is trying to repair can actually be fixed. This reinvigorates Momo's desire to reach the surface. With the transceiver fixed, Momo tasks Stray with installing the now working transceiver atop a nearby and very tall building. In order to do so, Stray must travel through the dangerous Zerk territory, Zerks being the strange creatures Stray encountered early on. After invading lots of Zerk living in the tower, B12 and Stray finally reach the top and install the transceiver, lighting up the mast. B12 starts to regain some memories, one being that they previously made a promise to open the hermetic seal to the city. Stray and B12 meet Momo at a bar and find him attempting to contact his fellow outsiders. He manages to contact Balthazar, who says they have found another way up, and that they have to go through the sewers in order to reach them, and then the connection drops. A companion named Seamus turns around and says that the sewers are the most dangerous place in the slums due to an infestation of Zerks. Seamus is actually the son of Momo's friend Doc. Doc was a scientist and was working on a weapon which would work against Zerks, but a few years ago he went missing whilst testing the device and hasn't been heard from since. Momo mentions that Doc spoke about a secret lab in the slums. B12 and Stray manage to find this secret lab in Seamus's home, and inside they find a broken tracker. After B12 and Stray manage to get it fixed, Seamus uses it to track his father's last location, which leads to a locked door. Behind it, Zerk territory. Stray and B12 find Doc still working away, and they manage to fix his weapon against the Zerks, which makes them literally explode due to the UV light, and Doc modifies it to fit it onto B12, allowing Stray and B12 to fight back against the Zerks, which is something they'll definitely need for their next adventure. This adventure is the trip through the Zerk-infested sewers to where Balthazar is. Doc returns to the slums and reunites with his son Seamus. Momo, Stray and B12 venture deep into the sewers, but there comes a point when Momo cannot go on and must turn back. Stray, after avoiding many Zerks, reaches a small settlement called the Ant Village. The Ant Village is where Balthazar resides. They meet him whilst he is doing some transcendental meditation, because of course. Anyway, Balthazar mentions that Clementine, who lives in Midtown now, can help Stray and B12 get to the outside, as she had a plan to leave the city. They reach Midtown and find that Clementine is a wanted woman, for the charge of being a troublemaker and an outsider. Her apartment is also cordoned off, although she is still hiding in there. She says that in order to infiltrate the subway, an atomic battery is needed. Stray and B12 are able to infiltrate the nearby factory and steal one with the help of a robot named Blazer. After meeting at a nightclub though, Blazer betrays Stray, B12 and Clementine, and the three of them are imprisoned and are separated. They break out, and after reuniting with B12, the three of them escape the prison. After a chase through the streets of Midtown, Clementine sacrifices herself and uses herself as bait to draw away the chasing sentinels, which are the police, so Stray and B12 can escape and fulfill their goal. They use the subway to reach the control room and disengage the locks on the security system, and they open the roof, breaking the hermetic seal. The only problem is that B12 had to take 3 pretty mean shocks for each lock to be disengaged, and as a result, ceased to function. The sun shone over the city for the first time in over a century. Clementine is saved, most of the Zerks are destroyed, and Stray walks out into the world above, presumably to look for their friends. The game then ends. So as I said, a story which probably wasn't too obvious at surface level, but instead you had to gain knowledge of the story through the environment and through B12's memories. And speaking of B12, I guess that would be a good place to start. So despite this little robot being a worthy companion and helping Stray get back up to the surface, B12 actually has a sad backstory. At first, B12 reveals from what they remember that they were helping a scientist in the past, but that its memory got corrupted. Later, some recovered memories reveal that B12 is not any old AI, but they are actually the scientists that B12 thought that they were working for. The scientist did have a family there with him in the city, and he would use the subway to go to work. Then at some point his family died. The scientist became very ill, and he was dying himself. The scientist was alone, and as a result, desperate to live on, he'd uploaded his consciousness into the computer. This didn't go exactly to plan though, as something went wrong, ending up with him being stuck for hundreds of years, all until he was awoken by seeing Stray on the CCTV. This is also why his memories were lost after 100 years of dormancy. The city, which would go on to be named the Dead City, was built for the sole purpose of being a shelter. It's located on the outskirts of Hong Kong. A fun fact, the city took its inspiration from the ex-Chinese military fort which became Kowloon, which is now demolished. You see, something happened on Earth which caused the apocalypse, and a city was built deep underground to preserve humanity, I guess. It's not clear as to exactly who was saved, whether that be rich, healthy folk, or whether it was something like a lottery ticket system. But like any civilization, a class-tiered society quickly formed, with 2 main areas being established. There was a sickly, dank, dark slums overrun with garbage from the nicer part of the city, Midtown. This is where the upmarket stores were, along with nightclubs and nice apartments. As B12 says, even in dire times, humans could not help but divide themselves by social class. B12 also says that humans did anything they could to get up to Midtown and build a better life for themselves, and after the humans died, the robots showed the same behaviour. Clean water was hard to come by, and the sewer system had large machinery that dug deep into the earth to draw out water. With water scarcity though, came rationing. It's not clear whether this was the only city that was built. There could very well have been more. Judging from this city was called Walled City 99, which may imply that there were other cities beside this one. I mean, humanity died out in this city, but maybe there are remnants of humanity still living in another one. It isn't clear what happened in the world to usher in the potential extinction of humanity in the first place. I mean, it probably wasn't an asteroid, as no living organism would survive, even cats. Maybe even a virus or a nuclear war. Either way, a hermetic roof seals off the city from the outside world, and the roof has lights on it which kind of mimic the presence of stars, even though that isn't their main purpose. Humans sealed themselves inside to protect themselves, but this meant that nobody could go outside again. B12 tells us that the world above was completely barren, unlivable and dangerous, and this of course isn't correct now as Stray was living out on the surface. But due to the appearance and presence of Stray, B12 became convinced that it was safe up there now. Now, another bit of backstory about the city: even though there is neon everywhere in the city, a memory indicates that this wasn't always the case, as there used to be strict energy caps, even more so in the poorer area of the slums. Midtown drew a lot of energy and had its own energy caps, but was nowhere near as affected by it as the people in the slums were. This energy cap was heavily policed too, as B12 tells us that one person lit up their home with neon light after they couldn't take the constant darkness and was never to be seen again. This led to a sort of revolution. It gave people hope, and most of the people in the slums did the same, which is why the city looks the way it does, as oppressors, being the sentinels or the police, could do absolutely nothing about it. So you may have seen their signs around the city, but Neco Corp were responsible for waste management in the city. But trash from Midtown and the upper levels overloaded, and it directly overflowed into the slums. Neco Corporation tried to develop a bacteria in order to try and dissolve the waste, but it didn't work. The bacteria they created mutated and grew exponentially, eating more than just the trash. This then gave birth to Zerks, which started taking over part of the slums, and as a result, parts of the city became covered in a weird substance. B12 notes that this substance seems to pulse as if it's alive, indicating that it might be some sort of giant organism. Zerks not only eat organic material, but they also eat metal and therefore companions. As far as we can tell, Neco Corp still exists as they operate the factory in Midtown. The robots have kept it going as a means of continuing to dispose of waste and also to have working society and an active ecosystem. Neco Corp did do some good though. They created plants which grew in the dark and didn't need the sun, so humans could still enjoy a little bit of nature. Companions responded in kind by keeping these plants much like humans would have. Trees and plants were obviously essential for keeping the city's air nice and pure. The elites would position themselves in the control room, which had clean living space, limitless power and freedom to move. But then the plague from the bacteria which Neco Corp unleashed on the city led to everyone dying, and this included the elites living up in the control room area. It was this plague which also killed the scientist's family. It was ultimately the greed of Neco Corp which made the residents of the city hate them. So the companions, or robots, were basically servants of the humans that once lived in the city. They are a cautious bunch and quite timid, and they speak their own language, but one which B12 is quickly able to interpret after it passed through the network that B12 was residing in. They used to be mindless, autonomous cleaning robots, but eventually they went on to mimic humans. When the humans died out, the companions carried on living, inhabiting apartments, continuing human traditions such as getting haircuts, eating meals at restaurants despite not having a digestive system. I guess this was their way of living in what they perceived to be a civilized society. B12 thinks that this was due to the companions actually missing the humans. The companions did still have a moral code, one that was policed by an albeit unpopular police force called Sentinels. Sentinels were ruthless. If a companion defied them, they would imprison them and literally wipe their memories, emotions, self-awareness, everything. After life became hard in the city, the Sentinels were used by the powerful people in the city to squash any potential unrest or threat, and after the humans died, a police state had been established and the remaining Sentinels carried on this behaviour. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this one, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Comment below what you thought of this game and its story, but for now, take care and I'll see you in the next one.